Okay. Okay. Well, good evening. Welcome to the October edition of the Metropolitan Washington Old Time Radio Club. So nice to see so many of you in attendance. Rob, good evening. Rob Fard, not to embarrass you or anything, Rob, but good to see you. We have quite a program tonight. Let me tell you how it's going to kind of go down here. We're going to we're not going to have a first 15 tonight. Jack is off getting some culture at George Mason University. Yes. So we won't have a first 15, but we're going to have a nice little skit that Sally is working up and working frantically to get ready here, in keeping with our usual kind of fly by the seat of our pants way of doing things, the way it works out. But we're going to have an introduction of guests, and then we'll have just a few items of business. We'll take a little break, and we'll have the skit, taking a little break after that, and then we'll have, I think, it'll be a very interesting panel discussion, because we're so fortunate to have three distinguished guests here tonight. Actually, two of them are members, but they don't get here that often. If I could introduce them, first of all, a regular contributor to Radio Recall, Mr. Carl Shadow. Carl. Yeah. Right behind him, our new Radio Recall editor, Martin Grams. And last but certainly not least, from the big broadcast, Jill Ahrold Bailey. Thank you. And I see a few others in the audience who haven't been here, have not been here, or who have not been here in a while. Could you please stand up and just state your name, starting back there, George?
Yep, George McHugh, yes. Been a while.
Well, thanks for coming. Good. And right next to you, John. Is it John?
Yeah, John Swallow.
John Swallow,
I just learned about it this morning.
Welcome. Thanks for coming. Right back there, please.
My name's Jim Franklin. First time here.
Wonderful. Wonderful. What brought you here? What brought you here, if I can embarrass you?
Radio.
Good. Good. How did you hear about it?
Actually, saw it online once and then saw a notification on Facebook today.
Good. Thank you. Okay, wonderful. Have I missed any others here? Okay, I think we have them. All right. Just a few little items of business. John Reiser is not here, our treasurer. He is at a broadcast engineers conference up in Hartford, Connecticut. He did, however, send me just a brief description of our bank balance. At the present time, it is $6,923.91. Now, there will be some expenses to come about. One of them is which we need to get a taxpayer identification number. That's a requirement coming out of our Library of Congress appearances. They've been very nice, but they said you got to have it. Pardon?
Are we going to become a non-profit education organization or just a taxpayer?
I've been in touch with our attorney. Well, our attorney is our family attorney who's going to do it. And I said, do we need to register as a 501c3? He said, I don't think you need to do that to at least get a TID. Now, when I sit down with him, we'll talk about this. But he said, if we go the whole way and become a formal organization, it'll be costly and cumbersome, is the way he put it. Yeah, but he said we can get the paperwork together for $100 or less, at least to get a taxpayer identification number, and that'll keep the IRS happy, yeah, and the Library of Congress, probably, which is probably the more important of the two, if you will. So anyway, I just wanted to let you know that will be hitting the bottom line at some point here. Alrighty. It's October. Elections are coming up. I've asked Lawrence Kondracht, if he would please head up the process for elections and for the Coelty Award. So could you please tell us all about it, Lawrence?
In answer to your question on asked, I am not channeling Roy Orbison. I did have cataract surgery, and my surgeon promised me that I will be returned to the state of vision that I had when I was a teenager, which is great. So I can argue with that. In any case, this year, as Bert said, it is that time of year, and so we are going to be doing the election process via email and via email exclusively. So, presuming that I get the updated list, because there were a number of people that were on the list that we were unsure of whether or not they were paid up or giving extra time for some new members. Once I get the, hopefully this weekend, get the updated list of membership, members in good standing, early next week, hopefully Monday or Tuesday at the latest, I will be sending out an email blast to all the people for whom we have emails that are members in good standing. And that first blast will be to obtain nominations for the officers, the 3 officer slots that we have: president, vice president, and treasurer. I will send out a second blast a couple of days later, and that will be for nominations for the Coelty Award. In both instances, I will give approximately 2 weeks for people to respond. And then I will have about a week gap where I can do the final tabulations, get the information I need, because whenever we send out for the ballots, we always have a little summary biography of the people who are running or who are the candidates for the award, as the case may be. I'll give you a chance to put that together, and then I'll send out another pair of separate email blasts. One, again, will be for the actual ballot for the officers, and the other will be for the ballot for the Coelty Award. All of this is timed to be concluded by absolutely not later than December 1st, which will allow in turn for the president and the officers to get the Coelty Award engraved and put together, and also do whatever else is necessary to pave the way for either staying in office or turning the offices over, as the case may be, whatever the membership decides. So, so look for emails, and as I say, the first pair should come out next week. They will have on the 5 letters abbreviation of our name first, and then whatever the title is for that specific email afterwards. So look for that in the subject line. And I've asked in the process, especially for the officer elections, that even if you don't have a nomination, that please respond and say, I don't have a nomination. This way I know, A, you got it, and B, that in fact you have made your choice to participate or not participate in the nomination process. When you get the ballot, it'll be basically the same thing. I'm voting for this person, or not voting, or you leave it blank. Sometimes people don't respond, that's one thing, but if you leave things blank, how do I know? So, okay, that's it. I appreciate your cooperation in advance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lawrence. Oops, let me get over here. Thank you, Lawrence. The radio recalls, because John is not here, as you know, usual procedure is for Jack to bring in the paper copies of the radio recalls, and those of you who get the paper copies to get them here, etc. Since neither Jack nor John are here, John either has or will be mailing them out to those of you who get the paper copies. And they should be in the mail very soon. In fact, he's coming home late tonight, he said, so he'll be getting on that. Let's see here. Michael Haid had intended to be here, but his wife had a minor test this morning and has had some reaction to it, so she won't. So he said, I won't be here, and so I just wrote back and said, our sympathies to Myra on behalf of the club. I understand we have some new books. Librarians, you want to tell us what you have?
Tonight we've been donated by Pancake Cakes, brought in a book called Fridays with Reddit, Red Barber. Whatever Became Love, that's one of the Lampartsky books, that's the third in the series. A book on radio comedy by Arthur Frank Wortham, and a radio production work text with an audio CD by David Reese and Lynn Gross. Also, we have a book that was donated, now Fred, I didn't hear who is,
Charlie Summers.
Charlie Summers?
Yeah.
Donated a couple of books of Edward R. Murrow, and the Birth of Broadcasting Journalism by Bob Edwards. And he gave us 2 books, one that is autographed and one that's not. And so we're going to put the unautographed copy into our living library, and perhaps what we may do is to have a raffle at some point in time for the autographed copy. So anyway, those are our new additions just as of tonight. So I brought some others. I brought some DVDs and some other books along, so if you get a chance to break, come along and peruse our books and DVDs. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Marcia. Those of you who are new here, we have a print lending library, and Marcia and Mark can fill you in on the details of that, where you can check out a book. On the other side, we have a CD lending library. We also have a tape lending library, but as you might imagine, the demand for tapes has pretty much gone that way. But I think Rebecca also has some tapes to sell. How much are you selling them for? What's the usurious rate you're getting these days? What? 10 cents. 10 cents.
3 for 4.
Or 10 cents per box.
Very good. Very good. Okay. 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 Does anybody have anything from the floor here? If it's a lengthy thing, we may have to defer discussion. But does anybody else have anything that needs to be brought up at this time? Anybody? Okay. Then what we're going to do? Are you just about ready, Sally?
I'm ready.
Okay. Here's what we're going to do. Or do you want to?
I can go ahead.
Go ahead.
All right, so we're going to do a fun, kind of on-the-fly recreation. So what I'm hoping for are some volunteers who might want to try out doing some sound effects. They're pretty basic. We have the phone. Oh, that I'm not very good at. We have some footsteps we need. We have some mysterious bumps in the night. We have some basic placing things on table, and I'll be doing the audio sound because I had to kind of finagle that a little bit so I know what my code means. But I do still need an announcer if someone would like to have a speaking role. Our female lead is very gracious. Miss Bailey is going to fill our female lead. Do we have a male lead?
Well, what do you think about getting our 2 other guests in here, Martin and Carl? Either one of you guys willing to do one of these?
I have an announcer and I have a precocious boy.
Oh, an announcer and a precocious boy. Okay.
Give Martin the precocious boy.
I have an announcer and a precocious boy, so I think we're sold. So what I do need is several sound effects volunteers. I can take 2, I can take 3 or 4, depending on what you might be interested in. So we're going to take a brief break, and if I could just meet with anybody who's interested, and my lovely actors, if I could just see you for a moment, and then we'll take maybe about a 10-minute recess so I can get that all together and everyone can check everything out, and then we'll come back and do the show. Sound good? Good.
A concept design for when he takes over. Now, he won't take over actually until the June issue. But he brought something in for me to look at, and I said, well, this is something that really belongs to everybody. It's a concept. If there's negative reaction, it might modify it. But we wanted to get your reaction to it, so it'll be over here. Secondly, I think one of the best pieces of news in a long time comes from Jill. She told me that starting November 6th, the big broadcast is going to promote or put on news about our club and its meetings. So, okay, you ready, Sally? Go ahead.
All right. So, we hope to entertain and to scare you just a little bit. And we give you a night on Bear Mountain. Sound coming up.
Lock the doors, put out the light, pull up the covers, and turn up your radio. It's time for WOTR to present Midnight Thriller. Tonight's program stars Ahrold Bailey and Hank Ickes in a chilling tale of suspense, A Night on Bear Mountain. Midnight Thriller is brought to you by the Metropolitan Washington Old Time Radio Club, purely for wicked fun. And now, tonight's adventure, A Night on Bear Mountain. The Collins family lives on a hill just outside of town. The people who live nearby call it Bear Mountain because of little Ira Collins, who always carries his teddy bear.
Ira, be quiet. You're giving me a headache.
But the boogeymen are here.
Quiet. I have to talk on the phone. Hello? Oh, hi, Mrs. Collins.
Who is it? Who is it?
It's your mother. Now hush so I can hear her. I'm sorry, Mrs. Collins. What did you say?
I want to talk. Let me talk.
Yes, Mrs. Collins. Everything's fine. Ira's a little overexcited, that's all. Oh, and the light burned out in the kitchen. I can't find any fresh bulbs.
Cindy, I want to talk. Let me talk.
Just a minute, Mrs. Collins. Ira wants to talk to you. Here's the phone, but give it back to me when you're done.
Hi, Mom. The boogeymen are back. Lots of them this time. They're hiding outside in the bushes, but Teddy smelled them. I've been zapping them with the magic flashlight you gave me. That's been keeping them away from the house. Good thing my aim's so good, huh? Oh, I gotta go. They're after Teddy. If they get him, they'll turn him into a boogie bear. Bye. I'm coming, Teddy. I'm coming.
Ira? Ira, come back here.
I can't. They'll get Teddy.
I said come back here.
Teddy needs me.
Right now.
If Teddy turns into a boogie bear and eats us up, it'll be all your fault.
Are you going to behave?
Got another
Stop
one.
making that awful noise.
I have to, or the magic light won't work.
Ira, stop it. I've been telling you to be quiet all night. Ira, stop shining that light in my eyes.
But the boogeyman.
I don't want to hear any more about the boogeyman. I don't care.
You'll care if they get in here. Look at the window.
Where?
I got him.
Cut it out.
If I stop, they'll get in. See, there's another one.
All right, that's it. Give that to me.
Hey, my boogie blaster.
It's a flashlight, Ira. A perfectly ordinary flashlight.
Is not.
Is too.
Is.
Ira, that's it. Go to your room.
But.
Now.
Oh, fine. But keep that boogie blaster handy. You're gonna need it.
Ira, can I come in?
I guess.
You were so quiet up here, I was able to get all my homework done. I brought your flashlight back and...
Boogie blaster.
Right. And some milk and cookies. How about that?
It's too late, Cindy.
Too late?
They got him.
Who got who?
Teddy. His ammo ran out and they rushed him. He put up a really good fight, but there were too many of them. So they got him.
Well, he looks all right, don't you, Teddy?
But he's not. They got him.
Well, he must have been a very brave bear.
The bravest.
Maybe we could do something? How about a bandage? Would that help?
Nothing will help now. He's gone.
Well, I'll put the cookies and milk here on your bedside table. After all you've been through, you might need a snack. And here's the blaster, in case the boogeymen come back.
No, they won't now. They don't have to. They have Teddy. Now he's a boogie bear.
My goodness, how do we protect ourselves from a boogie bear?
Teddy told me just before they got him, we have to rip him open and spread his stuffing all over the house.
Oh no, we don't.
Teddy said to. If we do it, he won't hurt us. And the stuffing will be like a charm to protect us from any more boogeymen.
Your parents will not come home to a mess like that. Bits of your favorite bear all over the house, they'd kill me.
If we don't do it, Teddy will.
We'll make a trade. Your boogie blaster for the bear. I'll take care of Teddy and you keep the blaster.
Cindy!
You've got the light for protection and I'll take my chances.
It won't work anymore.
Sure it will. It's a little weak, but it still works. This way you don't have to throw teddy bear insides all over the place.
You don't understand.
Don't worry about Teddy. I'll stand guard over him. Who knows? Maybe in the morning he might be well again.
No, don't take him with you. He's not Teddy anymore. He's a boogie bear. In a little while, he'll wake up.
Look, if he comes after you, zap him with your flashlight. Make all the noise you want as long as this door stays shut.
He's gonna wake up and turn into a big monster. He'll come after you with claws and fangs.
I'll take my chances. Good night, Ira. Hello, Mary Beth. It's me, Cindy. I just had to call you. This Collins kid is a real terror. I am never sitting for them again. You wouldn't believe the stories he tells. And the noise? No, things are quiet now. I made him go to his room and shut the door. I had to take his teddy bear away from him and hide it in the kitchen. No, he won't dare go in there. The light's burned out. He's convinced there's boogeymen in there. Honestly, boogeymen and boogie bears. Oh, Mary Beth, I better go. It sounds like he's snuck into the kitchen. I'll call you right back. Ira, I know you're in there. Ira, come on now. It's dark in there. The light's burned out, remember? You don't want to sit in the dark, Ira. Stop this. You're not going to find Teddy. I hit it and you can't get it. Ira, are you climbing on the counter? I don't want you to do that. You're going to hurt yourself. Did you hear me? Climb down now before you fall. Ira. Okay, yes, I hit Teddy at the top of the cabinet. Now climb down. I'll get him for you. Ira, please come down. This is dangerous. Are you scared? If you're too scared to come down, I'll help you. I just can't see you. It's too dark. Say something. I'll find you by the sound of your voice. Then I'll get you down from the counter, okay? Ira? Say something. Ira? Oh, Ira, I've had enough. This is not funny anymore, Ira. Ah! Let go of my ankle! Ira! Ira! Help!
Hello? Hello? Oh, hi, Mom. Everything's fine. Well, Cindy made a big mess in the kitchen, and my boogie blaster isn't... She can't come to the phone. Why not? Well, she wouldn't listen to me. That's why not. But it's okay now, because I saved the house from the boogeymen. They won't come around here anymore. It's okay to come home now. Yes, and hurry. It's so lonesome here. Teddy's gone after he became a boogie bear. I had to... Yeah, Cindy's still here, sort of. Where is she? I told you, in the kitchen. Yeah, I said she made a big mess in there. Well, it was Teddy that made the mess, really. But he couldn't help it. He turned into a boogie bear. And you're coming right home? That's great. Oh, Mom, would you bring me some new batteries for my boogie blaster? I probably won't need it anymore, but you never know. Boogeymen can be pretty tricky.
You've been listening to A Night on Bear Mountain, starring Ahrold Bailey as Cindy and Hank Hickes as Ira. Sound effects by Dennis Roma, Martin Grams, and Kathy McCara. The play was directed by Sally Stevens. This is your announcer, Carl Shadow, and this has been a WOTR production of Midnight Thriller.
Okay. Pictures.
Oh, it used to be one.
Well done, Cass. Thank you very much.
Sure did.
Okay.
Get close together. Get close together. There we go. I love it. Get closer.
Okay. Yes. There we go. Okay.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, another brief break while the cast comes back down to earth. 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Okay, mic check, even though we don't have a mic check. Everybody here? Mic check. Can you hear? Okay, I'm glad you're here. Yes, all right.
All the mics are accounted for.
Mics are here. E-A-R-E-R-E. Okay,
They're all
good
live,
enough.
too.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think what is really neat about having the three of them here tonight is that you notice their youth, which is the future of old-time radio.
I'm a lot older than I look, let me tell you.
And so it's just wonderful. And what I'm going to do is ask each one of them what got them involved in old-time radio, and we'll kind of go from there, and then we'll take questions from the audience. I'd like to start with you, Jill, because you, in your email to me, you said that radio recreations are a passion of yours. Mm-hmm. How did that come about?
How did the radio recreations come about? So I'll kind of jump back to jump forward. Actually just moved down here a year ago from New York City, where I was born and raised.
My goodness.
And when I was in New York City, I was part of a radio recreation group called Gotham Radio Theater.
Oh my, oh my.
And I was actually one of their founding members. And it was begun by myself and two other members, Laura Leopard and Sydney Ranga. And both of them have a love of old-time radio. Sydney knew my love of old-time radio and my family history of old-time radio, which I'll backpedal to in a second. And so they approached me first to be an actress in the first show. And they approached my husband, who's a professional actor as well, to be the sound man. And he said, well, great, anything that Jill does, I want to do. And we got up there for our first show. We're in the rehearsal room with a table full of sound effect equipment, Foley equipment. And my husband stands forward and goes, I don't know what I'm doing. What is this for? What is this for? I said, oh, that's a crash box, honey. Well, that's that. He goes, how do you know all of this? I don't know what to do. I said, well, I'll do it. So I wound up doing sound effects and acting in that first show, and then my husband got to act it as well, so we switched kind of places. Coming back to it, how I knew that was a crash box, or that was a prop door, or this is how you make the sound effect of champagne bottle opening is with a balloon and a needle, is my grandmother, Marianne Ahrold, was a old-time radio writer and performer.
Oh my.
And she wrote The Adventures of Jane Arden. and she wrote for Youth Courageous. And I am still, so I'll put this out to this group, I am still looking for recordings of her shows.
I have 2 episodes.
Oh, excellent. I have the elevator.
And I'm not stealing her thunder. So, but when
No,
she said Adventures of Jane Arden,
Well, that's the idea.
that was
of
Weber,
this. We
George
figured.
Weber.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Oh.
Yeah. So I have a lot of her old scripts. So maybe we can.
Yeah. Which one of us?
So you know, I kind of learned this at her knee. She also, when she retired from radio, when she got married, she still continued doing community theater in Burlington, Iowa, and she taught at the University of Iowa. She discovered a lot of actresses there and sent them on to California and to Chicago to work in radio and in film. And then she said, "Well, I'll just keep theater alive in the heartland here. That's what I do." She's a wonderful woman, and she and I would have many conversations. I would listen to the old time radio shows with her, and then we would have many conversations about the behind the scenes. You know, how did you do this? How did you do that? And she was very. She didn't try to glamorize it, which was always striking to me. She would be very kind of deadpan almost about some things. Say, "Oh, well, that's how we did that. Well, that's how we did that." And it was not trying to enrapture me, but she didn't need to, because it was so magical to me that she didn't need to sprinkle any extra magic on it or pretend it was something it wasn't. And I'll never forget. I came to her one time after listening to an episode. It was a Western. I think it might have been Fort Laramie. And I'm listening to it, and I say, "How did they do that sound effect? That was so cool that the front part of the cabin just falls. How did you do that sound effect? Oh, wait, did you do it with the crash box? Oh, wait, did you do it with several chairs? Did you?" And I started counting back to her all these different ways that she told me they made sound effects live in the studio. And she says, "Oh, no. We had records for that kind of thing." Oh, okay.
Oh, my goodness.
So then, you know, translating forward, I remember when we were doing Gotham Radio Theater, and we had this incredibly complex sound effect to do as part of Around the World in 80 Days, and the cast is all saying, "Well, how could we do this on stage? How we're going to do the feet, and then we're going to do the horse hoofs." And I said, "Oh, no. We do a record for that." So in our stage production, we have the sound effects person reaching over and grabbing an LP and putting it down and, you know, miming the needle so that it would be a true recreation of how it would have been done.
My
Anyway,
goodness.
so that's a little of my background.
My goodness. Well, it's interesting. You come from a radio-related background. And I think both of you come from radio-related backgrounds too, don't you? Martin, how about you?
Not on the professional end.
Not in the professional end.
No.
But from the, go ahead.
I mean, all I did was play with toy shoes to see. That's about as professional as I got. I was exposed to old-time radio as gifts from my grandmother, audio cassettes. You know, remember Metacom, Adventures in Cassettes? You used to have 15 minutes on a side, so annoyingly you had to flip the cassette to hear in the middle of a show to hear the other half. And now we have buttons we push and it'll play 50 days worth without interruption. Yeah. And over time I just got hooked onto it, even though originally I didn't even know who the characters were. I just liked listening to them. So it's kind of an appeal over the years that I don't know who Jack Benny is and somehow I find him funny. And I didn't understand the recurring funny jokes. So over time I fell in love with it. And one day I was going through a bunch of broadcast logs that different people did for suspense. And as a high school project, I was told to see if we can do something like a book report. So I did a book. And I just dug through archives and found out where the errors originated and did some digging. And a friend of mine early on told me research isn't, at this point, internet was just kind of invented. So it was one of those things where you don't go to the internet, but you go to the library, you find all the books you can, and magazines and fanzines. From there, I was put in touch with all the people in the hobby, and it branched out from there. Apparently, I did something good the first time because everyone wanted to know what my next book was, and I was only going to do the one, and I wasn't even out of high school. And the end result was I got better as I went along. I got better help, more connections. Looking back at the older books, I wish I had the sources I do now back then. And it's become an addiction, because not just to correct mistakes or add broadcast dates to recordings, we don't have broadcast dates, but you do research for one show and it branches off to another. And somewhere along the line, someone sits back and goes, who the heck cares about that show? There's only 4 episodes existing out of 20 years of broadcasting. And the answer is, I do. And I want to know the plot summaries. Carl will agree with me, when you do research, there's one fallacy to that. It does become a chore. And to read 1,000 Green Hornet scripts in 2 years, at first it's fun, and the best of them are rewarding, but there's a point where it becomes a chore. So when someone picks up an 800-pound cockroach killer and says, why do I want to read this thing? The answer is, it has everything you can't find anywhere else. And so I guess the closing statement is, I got into old-time radio because I like old-time radio.
Oh, good. Good. How about you, Carl?
Well, I guess I have one of the best names for old-time radio, Shadow, right? And of course, when I was a little kid in elementary school, a couple of the old teachers would be calling me Lamont. Lamont. Well, obviously, these people knew Lamont Cranston from The Shadow, and so when the CBS Radio Mystery Theater debuted in '74, I was hooked, and started buying LPs and cassettes from Dave Golden's Radio Yesteryear and got hooked on OTR and spent years in science, and I was still interested in OTR, and now I'm basically doing research full-time. I read a lot of the liner notes for the Radio Spirit sets, articles for our grand publication, and all kinds of research. And so when somebody brings up an obscure program or name, of course I'm,
You're the one to call.
Exactly. So in a nutshell, that's my background. So.
Very good. Jill, you came down from New York. How did you end up at WAMU?
It was kind of a long connection, but when they were looking for a new host for the big broadcast, they cast a net that was wide and deep. And I was actually one of the 3 finalists for the host position, along with Murray, and they realized that, Ed, and I was telling someone about this evening, is that Ed was a one-man band. He could really do it all, he knew it all, and he didn't need a producer. Because he was able to he knew the shows in his head, he had that encyclopedic knowledge, and he could program the show in his head. He, of course, also worked very closely with Neil Ellis, and so that was something where the station kind of realized that they were going to need a producer going forward. They needed someone to do the programming, someone who had, a very wide. I hope I can fulfill that, and I think where I lack in knowledge, I have the passion and the desire to learn and know more. So I have that going for me, I hope. But anyway, so that's how I got involved. Is that they basically approached Murray and myself and said, "How would you two feel about teaming up for this?"
Nice.
And I said, "That's absolutely it's a passion." So.
Am I correct in assuming that the other co-producer is Murray?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Very good. And do you do the program live on Sunday nights, or do you tape it in advance?
Great question. Yeah, so this Sunday night we are live, and Rob Bamberger is going to come back, and they're going to together. It's like the great team together again for the first time. So they are going to record live, but we usually record 2 weeks in advance on a Thursday morning. So there are some times when you hear Murray's voice sounds a little, you need some coffee there, Murray. But we do that because it does take some time to pull the resources together. We want enough time so we can clean things, make sure they're broadcast quality. And if we're playing things that we've played on the big broadcast before, we're able to go back to the archives. But we're trying to bring some new things to the program too, some more rare artifacts. So they take some time to clean up and make sure they're ready for digestion. Sure.
Yeah, well, good. Well, speaking of rare artifacts, that's kind of your specialty, Carl, isn't it?
Yes, for many years.
How did you get? Tell me.
For many years, I researched the Shadow because that's all I was interested in. I was Carl Shadow. I was actually the Shadow. And so I wanted to know everything about the Shadow. And of course, but Dennis, fellow cast member, shows me his Shadow card from 1995. Well, I was involved in the Shadow Club and doing all these things with the Shadow. And over the years, as Martin has just alluded to in his Green Hornet book, you just get tired. But it's the shadow. Too bad. So I kind of turn focus 180 degrees, and I research all kind of obscure, unusual, fascinating programs that are there everywhere, including in the DC area, which I published in Radio Recall, for example, last year was House of Horror, a horror program from 1944 that was on WMAL. The latest issue that has just come out has Black Moon Mystery, another mystery program. This was produced by WFBR in Baltimore, and it was piped down the NBC wire to WRC in DC and sponsored by Gunther Beer. So we're looking for episodes for those two programs. Local programs that we have audio for include Border Patrol. This was a mutual program produced by WOL, the former mutual affiliate, in 1941. There's several 5 or 6 episodes of those available. And also a program that I've been working on, a soap opera called Janice Gray, that was on WTOP from 43 to 47. So hopefully in conjunction with you, we can get some of these more locally rare programs to generate more interest and, you know, give it a variety on the program. So.
Very good. I think as many of you know, Martin is a prolific author, and I don't think you are any stranger to the stacks, burrowing in to find rare stuff too, aren't you?
Oh, well, Carl and I were talking about this earlier today. We define research as doing the legwork, which means tracking down the family relatives, tracking down the archives, where they graduated, check the college. Sometimes they donated all their stuff for a tax deduction to their alma mater. Sometimes state historical societies. There's an advantage and a difference between a 4-page website and a 400-page book, and the difference is the source material as well. So I'll give an example. We were talking to Bert during dinner this evening earlier, or lunch, whatever it was. It's early. I got to meet Ralph Edwards Jr. in California. Really nice guy. Told him I was doing a book on Truth or Consequences, one of his dad's favorite loves. He was very open, said, fly out, I'll give you the keys to the kingdom. Went through a room about this size filled with boxes stacked to the ceiling, filing cabinets. We were pulling out stuff that had never been opened in 60 years. He must have had about 3,000 photographs taken candidly during the broadcast over the 15 years. If a woman came home and found a camel in her kitchen rigged with her husband, yes, there's a picture of her being surprised with a camel in her kitchen. If a guy's hanging upside down playing a piano, you see him strapped up. These are photos meant for publicity, and not all of them got used. And a friend of mine the other day said, you should put them all up on the internet so people can enjoy them. And I said, they're not mine. I got permission. I spent a lot of money going out there, but they will be reprinted, the best of them, in a book. And so going to the source means getting the best materials too. And in many cases, and I'll give a happy story, a few weeks ago when I was doing the convention, I got an email and I said, I'll get back to you in a couple of weeks. His mother and father were both a contestant on the same show, and that's where they met. And he knew the stunt, and he knew the year. He knew nothing else. And he said it had to be 1942, so it had to be radio. And 2 weeks later, I pulled out everything. We went through the scripts. And thankfully, we were able to read the handwriting when they filled in the contestant name properly, and we were able to find it almost in a heartbeat. So for genealogy purposes, he now has an answer. So if someone says, why do you research about old-time radio, there's one thank you letter I can point and say, that's why.
Very good. Now if you'd like to channel your inner self, or however we put it, if you could, let's say, talk to a radio character or director or whatever, who would it be? Let's round robin again. Jill, you want to lead off there?
Okay. Well, it's just funny. I was just having a similar conversation about this recently. I think so. It's not a character, although he is a character. I would most like to be in the room with Jimmy Durante. And it's because some of the more rare recordings now I'm listening to, these unedited shows, and his improv skills, his improvisational skills are so extraordinary. I mean, they're just that the recordings that you hear, the edited shows, don't really do it justice. And when you hear him off mic, but the mic is rolling, or you hear some of the warm-up rehearsals that were then, turned into the broadcast shows. The way he was able to keep up with anyone who was put in front of him, the way that he took the script as a jumping off point, and he was so self-aware in a good way of himself as a performer. There's so many greats, it's hard to choose from, and of course, like Jack Benny, I'd almost be embarrassed to be in the room with because I wouldn't know what to say. But I feel like I could have a really good conversation with Jimmy Durante and kick back a couple of beers and talk about life. Yeah.
Very good. Carl?
I'm going to choose Willis Cooper.
Cooper.
Willis Cooper, yes. Lights Out, Quiet Please, of course, come immediately to mind. But Cooper just did his career as a writer. It was just amazing, and it would take me the rest of the night to just spiel off the shows he was involved in, the Army Hour, Empire Builders, and his mind. Just to talk to him would be, I'd be scribbling all these notes, and it would just be an amazing thing to just talk to somebody who was able to understand what radio was all about back then, and a real radio pioneer. And it basically that's
Very good. Martin?
For me, it'd probably be William S. Paley, president and owner of CBS, because over the years going through archives, I see contracts and inter-office memos and letters, and I suspect half the arrangements and agreements that were not put to contract was a verbal handshake, and I would love to be a fly on the wall to hear some of the conversations. An example was in the famous talent raids in 48 and 47, when he was securing everyone from Edgar Bergen to Jack Benny to Amos and Andy. The deal with Amos and Andy was that they would become co-share owner of CBS. And the problem was, after their deal, IRS got involved. At that time, I think it was the Federal Treasury, and said, you can't have capital gains. And Jack Benny said, why not? Amos and Andy got it. And they said, yeah, but it has to be for property. Amos and Andy, anybody can play the role, and it's considered property. Jack Benny's show without Jack Benny can't. So in order to secure a lot of those NBC talents, as an example, Paley did the negotiation. Here's where we're just going to give you a consulting fee. In reality, he was just securing all the talent for what he knew was coming around the corner, was television, and grab all the best he could. But I suspect, because NBC had a stern policy up to 47 about no pre-recorded programs, it had to be live. That is NBC's short-sightedness, and why CBS really got all of the celebrities, because Paley shook hands and said it's not going to be in the contract, except for certain terms, and it was not public, because everything in tabloids and Variety and all of them said how much money they're going to get paid, etc. They never mentioned the one thing I think that was a verbal handshake, and that is, and you can record them in advance. And it was, according to one off-site source for Jack Benny, it was a shook hands with Paley and says, you've got me. So I'd love to be a fly in the wall, or at least talk to Paley and ask how he did his business.
Sounds like you know how he did his business.
Yeah, but I'd like to know how he thought.
We talked about favorite actors or writers or whatever. How about if you're to listen to a classic radio show, which is your favorite or favorites?
You go through flavors. I mean, I don't know if that's the same for you guys, but I'll the light is leaving now. We're getting into the dark part of the year, and so inevitably I'm wanting to listen to more suspense and more horror shows. And summer is for sci-fi. I don't know, maybe there's something about, summer is for sci-fi. Spring comes along and you're like, I want to listen to My Favorite Husband, and I want to listen to Adventures of Maisie. And so I think you go through flavors and, flavors in a day. I think it's hard to choose a favorite, but I do see that, when I'm driving around and I'm popping the CDs in to listen to, or streaming from my old time radio app, that there is some, for me, it's kind of cyclical in a year.
Interesting. Gentlemen, who wants to?
Well, I'm not sure, is it a program that there's audio extent or scripts extent? I mean, you have to qualify here. But
Yes.
So, you know, so. No, probably Dark Fantasy, too, because that's a program that I've enjoyed for many years and wrote about it several years ago in Radio Recall. And it's still looking for uncirculated episodes and scripts and things, but I just... Over Lights Out and Quiet Please simply because maybe the more obscure fact, even though it was an NBC network show, but still coming from Oklahoma City, it was just the local, the flavor there was just, I thought, just excellent. So again, dark fantasy for me. So.
And I side with Jill. Eclectic taste, and 1 month I'm into Hopalong Cassidy, and I'll listen to like a 20-episode marathon driving to Chicago, and then next month I'm listening to a serial for Superman, and the next month I'm into Claudia, which is a soap opera. So it's eclectic, yeah.
Very interesting. Okay. Coming back to what we talked about at the beginning here, it's impressive that all of you are so young in a what are we going to call it? A genre that harks back many decades. And one of the problems in OTR is the drop-off in membership. We've had other clubs fold. Fortunately not here, but I mean elsewhere. Frankly, in our own group, I can remember when we had larger groups in attendance on a regular basis. It's a general aging of the population. To keep the OTR going, to keep not only the club, but keep the hobby going, in your opinion, what needs to be done? Any secrets here? I know you guys
I'll
talk.
jump in because
Go ahead.
again, the obscure factor, just bringing in new shows. Of course, we always like to hear Jack Benny or The Shadow or from Media Malley or one of the most common shows. But I think for OTR, and basically for any organization, as long as we bring in new shows and publicize that these are new shows, you've recently discovered them, these are important, it's a valuable contribution. I think that's one of many things that researchers can do to improve the hobby.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I've always believed the hobby was made up of 4 or 5 factors. It's conventions, clubs, publications, the collectors, recordings. And the sad part is every time a convention folds, every time a club folds, it's a piece of the hobby that's dying down. Like Civil War, you still have reenactments, you still have fan gatherings or club meets, you still have magazines being published and books being published. It's a matter of younger kids are into old-time radio, and I'll give a surprise statistic because I'm one of those bean counters that likes to do that kind of stuff. There's probably more young kids into old-time radio than the older generation really thinks. They just don't go to conventions, they're not signing up for the clubs. I've been at conventions and antique toy shows and selling old-time radio, and half the people who buy them are under the age of 30.
Wow.
And they literally are into Jack Benny and X-1, and they're asking questions. They're just not out there because I'm not saying they have an attitude towards an older fan base, thinking that there's a demographic or diversity between the two, but my father was a professional magician. He's retired now. And over the years, every time Doug Henning or David Copperfield was on TV, and we'd be at some magician's house, and it's an evening party, I don't know why, but throughout the entire evening, oh, no, we know he can't do that. It's like they were all negative against a guy who was successful. And when I made that crack once, a magician looked at me and went, yeah, we are. And I think in a similar vein, the younger audience kind of looks the same as, do I want to carry on? Because there's a reason I didn't become a magician. Do I really want to go down that route where I already see something wrong? They go to convention. Example, I was at a Friends of Old Time Radio convention in Newark, New Jersey. And there was a young kid who had a table. His name was Mickey. I forget his last name. And he actually had gone through and found some scripts at some university and put together a broadcast log. He had them on the table. I'm going down the hallway because I had bought one of them for like $10. And Paul Mellos, I think it was, comes up to me and says, oh, so you got one? And I said, yeah. He goes, is it good? I says, I don't know, but I've never seen a kid under the age of 20 do a broadcast log and set up at a convention with his own money, so I'm supporting him. And if I can go back and buy 3 more and I can buy a few, he goes, oh, and immediately he went in the room to go buy one. It never dawned on him he should be supporting the young kid. And that's when I started seeing what I think Mickey was referring to and others that I see at conventions now. It's just, oh, well, I don't go to those conventions. Those old people can sit around and listen to old radio. It's the opinion that there's the patting on the back. In my first book, before it was even published, people were handing me business cards and $20 for the book, and they didn't know me. I'm not really in the hobby by name, and yet they were handing me that. And that support I still remember to this day.
Wow.
So I'm not saying people aren't giving support to the young kids. They're out there. It's just getting them more into it.
Good. I'd like to follow up on that. Well, I'll just stay with you. So what do we do, I mean, looking at it from a club standpoint, what do we do to get them in here?
Well, it's business. It's debits versus credits. And my opinion would be like what we did with the convention that I put on in Maryland. We incorporate old-time radio in genres that also include movies and TV. And there are young people who are under the age of 30 who are there into old-time radio. But a lot of them, I gave them a free admission for the first time just to get them through the door. After that, they came every year. So in some cases, rather than try to get them to pay $20, give them a free membership for a year. I mean, there's lots of possibilities and options. But once they're into it and they're given that nudge, I think they'll be hooked. I mean, they're already into old-time radio. Facebook has this great ad thing where you can target specific people. So I can target people under the age of 35 who are into old-time radio specifically. If they're not hitting that target, they don't get the ad. And it can be a link to click and sign up for free club memberships for 1 year, all the old radio clubs. You'd be shocked that probably 80% of them easily, at least I would figure, would renew, and that's how you slowly build.
Interesting.
May
Carl.
I interject here? The club does recreations at Library of Congress. How about going to the schools
Sure.
to get it, you know, bring in all the kiddies and say, folks, this is how it was. And maybe you'll get, you know, a few members. Talk about, you build up the club that way.
Good point. I think the club used to do that more
They used to
often.
do
Let
that.
me
Oh,
open it up. Some of you who've been longtime members, didn't you used to go to like senior citizen
That was
centers?
what we were thinking, Bill
That's the
Jacobs.
def-
Pardon?
Jacobs was really into doing that, and unfortunately, I think at the time he passed away, it was fading off. Of course, it also could be that the audiences were literally fading over.
Well, I'm talking about the schools, you know,
Yeah, I
a
know.
middle school
Yeah,
or a high
We
school or
got that
something. Right?
demographic.
Yeah, right.
Senior citizens.
Yeah.
It's kind of almost the reverse problem. It takes us a long time to put on a show, to
Yes.
get right,
Oh, right.
to do all of that stuff. And part of it is our age and our abilities to, want to get together and do things. And it'd be really kind of neat if we could figure out a way to get into the drama departments and say,
Right.
Right.
let you guys
That's right.
do the recreation.
That's right. Or do it as a joint.
Joint venture,
Yeah.
right.
We had
We have had people over time, schools have come in and asked to look at scripts because they want to have the students put them on.
Okay.
And the idea is, all right, what's a good script that a bunch of high school students?
But we don't figure out how to turn that into.
No, that's true, they're coming.
Right.
Jill, that's what we
Jill,
gotta do.
go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think, reaching out to the drama departments or English departments, and doing joint ventures too, saying we're going to do this radio recreation of Ellery Queen, and we'd like to invite some of your class members to come and it doesn't have to be something as formal as a full production. What you did this evening, right, was a lot of prep work. I know because I've done that before. But you're not having to go out and buy a lot of stuff. You're not having to do a lot of rehearsal, and especially the young people coming in, it's more exciting for them to have to do it, on their feet. And so to say we're going to go in, feet first and do an exploration, not a show, but an exploration of this old time radio script and sound effects. And the nice thing is that with young people, and I used to be a teacher, that was my former life too, before I was the actor. So
But with young people, all you have to do is give them a taste. And then they love it. And now, the internet being what it is, resources being out there what they are, they will follow the breadcrumbs back. So you don't have to present them with the full buffet and a sit-down dinner. You can just give them the little taste of it, and they'll love it and come. So,
Would this be us reaching out to the schools and putting something on, or
Yeah.
inviting them to come in and put something on to us, or both?
I think you can do both. I think having opportunities at your monthly meetings for a drop-in and say, in the first hour of it, we do a radio recreation, and we invite people who are visitors to the club to come in and join us. And then the second half is you're welcome to stay, and we talk about club matters. And then also reaching out to the schools. You'll probably have better luck with colleges first. That's just a guess. And private schools or high schools. Public schools are going to have to go through all kinds of red tape just to get, this is my education side coming in, because I used to have to go into schools, and it can be very difficult to get in the door of public school. But private schools have a little bit more freedom in that area, but also colleges. And if you get a resume, as it were, for your group saying we've performed at this university. We did a group with George Mason in their drama department or their English department, and George Washington University. So Georgetown. You get a couple of those, and then you can approach the public schools and say, this is something we do for the community, would you be interested? And then the principals say, yes, excellent. Well, it's May, and all of the kids have finished their testing, and they're stir crazy. We'd love for you to come into our auditorium and do a presentation and invite some people up from the audience.
Great. I hope we're getting this all down now, Sally. Sally's right. That's good. Rob?
I want to ask Jill, do you have demographics of your listeners? What is the average age of a broadcast listener?
We do, and it's something that we look at every quarter, so we get to see how that grows and how that where it grows. And it's, of course, over the last 10 years, this is something I asked when I first came on. So in the last 10 years, we've seen the audience age shift, and it supports what you were saying. There are a lot of young listeners. The core listenership is still from the ages of about 60 and up. But what the station was surprised to see, which I was not surprised to see, is that there is an age group of 25 to 45 that is growing. And, frankly, I think they probably have younger than 25. They're just not clocking those numbers. It's hard to tune into, a teenager's radio. And also, they're not counting, who's in the car, right? So if the 45-year-old mom is driving her kid to soccer and the 10-year-old is listening to Superman, well, guess what? That 10-year-old is going to, be listening to Superman, and then he's going to listen to The Shadow, and then it's going to, but they're not counting the younger ones. I know, because I'm reading a lot of the emails that come in for the big broadcasts, that there are a lot of high school students and younger who are listening to the program now. It's one of the reasons why we put The Adventures of Superman on this summer. We were trying to build it in, because people were writing saying, my grandkids are listening to this to me. It's so wonderful. Can you please play more of it? Can you play can you play, what was the one, Space Patrol? I said, oh, excellent, yes. Because I have a list. This is maybe you shouldn't tape record this part, but I have a list that are the things I want to play, and there are some of them that the station is a little wary about, and if we get one email that says, we'd like you to play this, I say, yes, all right, I can put that on. Slip it in, that's right. Right.
How does the station vet their content, so to speak?
The programming?
Yes.
It's
For the big broadcast.
right. So if it's something that was played before, in the 52-year history of the program, we get a green light. Well, with some exceptions. I will say Amos and Andy is a harder sell these days, for obvious reasons. So, barring that, if it's been played, we kind of get the green light. And then if it's never been played on the big broadcast before, which is hard to find, except for the new things that you're coming, right? Then it's listened to by me. It's listened to by Murray because he's got to talk about it on the air, so he has to vet as well. And if we feel that there's anything controversial, we do take it up the ladder a little bit just to make sure. Recently, we did a bit on Lord Haw Haw, and I felt it was really important that we put it on. We had the anniversary of his first broadcast that came just this past year, so I wanted to do. And it was only a 10-minute spot. But, we're playing audio that has inflammatory language in it. So we have to take it up the ladder and say to our director of programming, Lenny Holman, to the director of the station, to JJ, and say, is this okay? Because if someone flips on their radio at 10:55 at night and they haven't heard our introduction of this is Lord Haw Haw and this is, World War II, they just hear somebody saying, I can't even repeat it, but, saying what he says, and they don't know, and they're thinking, how dare this university station play this kind of, and then they flip it off before they hear at the end of it us saying, and that was, so we do, some things we have to go up the ladder, but mostly it's myself and Murray.
Mainstream stuff, like Carl just did the thing on another release of Phil Harris, Alice Faye. Well, you don't play a lot of that, but that seems to be a very well-respected show today.
Yeah.
And those are newer episodes because they aren't out in the public. They came from Alice Faye's request to the library. So, how would you run something like that into the thing, or do you not?
No, we do. With something as there. So it's funny, and this is maybe getting a little granular, but with the comedy, the vetting process on that is more us listening to it and trying to think about how we contextualize it for people who don't get all the topical references. Right. Someone like Fred Allen, he's great, but his topical references, he will go through 22 topical references in a 5-minute spot, and if you don't get them, you kind of tune out, and so we listen. We try then. This is actually something we're talking about right now. Is how do we present that then, so that we don't lose the audience who is new to it, because that is a focus of ours. Is how do we bring in new people and how do we not lose them? One of my ideas is, so you play 2 Fred Allens back to back. One that's a little bit more accessible, right? That has less references in it, and then the one right after has more references in it. But by then you're hoping that they've hooked in a little bit, they've liked what they've heard, and so they're going to write out the references they don't get. But it's tricky. It's tricky, and actually the Alice Faye and Phil Harris show it's similar. There's some references that you have to contextualize, but you don't want to get on the air and feel like you're lecturing, about it, because that's going to turn people off. You want to be able to just present the jewels that they are.
You have a quick side?
Yeah.
Okay, quick sidebar.
No, quick sidebar to what you were telling me.
And then-
One night on Turner Classic Movies, they played minstrel movies all night.
Yeah.
We're talking The Jazz Singer, Marx Brothers Day at the Races. I met up with Bob at Osborne at one of the film festivals, and I said, I know you're usually just come in for once every 2 weeks to do the narration. I assume you know what goes on behind the scenes a little bit. Was there any flack the night you did uninterrupted, unedited minstrels? And I agree, Amos and Andy's an audio minstrel, but it's not an insultive minstrel. And he said, no, actually, we had 2 compliments for blowing it, not 1 complaint. He goes, but I'll add that the next day we played a World War II cartoon that was from a 1980s TV print where the word kraut was bleeped out, like silenced. He goes, we had 2 letters of complaint for having it bleeped out because it shouldn't have been edited and altered. So the demographic that listens to old-time radio has a better understanding of the history.
Interesting.
That's true.
Yeah.
I have a question for Jill concerning some of the shows that you would be more reluctant to air because of the rather time-limited topical references. has there been any discussion at the station about maybe following up some of the things, some of the more broad appeal things that you air with podcasts of some of the more obscure things?
Yes, and that's, it kind of goes into another issue, which is a legal issue. I mean, it is the bane of my existence that we cannot podcast the show. Part of me understands why. My father actually worked for BMI for his whole career. And so I was brought up in a household where we understood what intellectual property rights meant. And so that part of me understands why we can't podcast. On the other hand, there's part of me that says, oh, come on, guys, it's Condé Nast who owns the shadow. They don't even really know that they have it. I mean, they've got the box, so it's, like, what are they really doing with it? Oh, they're going to make a movie? Yeah, okay, yeah, someday, So there's so the podcast issue it's sticky, and it always has been. And because we're a university, there's an argument that we would be the person to go after. If we were putting these shows up, and we were, if we were a smaller station, if we were broadcasting out of a smaller town, maybe we could put this up online, and Condé Nast is not going to go after us. But they do. They want to make an example. And so WAMU in the DC area, that's exactly who they would like to make an example of. So it's frustrating. One idea that I've had for this is, so we've launched an audience interaction forum, a big broadcast audience forum. And that's to get some dialogue going between the station and the listeners about the content, about the programming. And there's talk about WMU is going to transition over to a new website design. When they do that, I'm hoping when we move our audience forum over, we're going to be able to provide links so that we can say, if you enjoyed this show, this program tonight, you might enjoy a similar program, or you might enjoy this program that was done by the same producer or the same writer. Here's the link. We're not podcasting it. We're not housing it. You can't go after us. But just to point the way and say it's available here, it's available here, it's available on Radio Spheres. So to kind of help the people who are looking on their search.
I think
So be open to ideas on this too.
But
to follow
could I
what
just?
Hank said, though, I would like the podcast to be almost exactly what the three of you do. An interview with Martin about the Green Hornet. And you can reference a part of the show. You don't have to play the show. But to give people that background of, this is what the Green Hornet was about, this is what happened, this is, all that, whatever you can summarize your 800-page volume on. But, put that in a podcast form of an hour-long interview with Martin.
Yeah.
And then say, we're going to play Green Hornet episodes for the next 12 weeks. And then you have that podcast available for people to go back for the historical reference to some of this stuff. And if you do the same thing with Fred Allen, so to speak, you say, okay, here's the politics of the 1940s, and this is what Fred was angry about. He was angry about the censorship, he was angry about all of this other stuff, and that's what's going to filter into all of this. And people can go back and grab that stuff, and you won't be putting the copyrighted stuff online, you'll be putting your own content on.
Right, that's great. That's a great idea. I love that. Yeah.
Could I jump in here? I'm going to back up. What else, now you mentioned Superman, what else is bringing younger folks into the program?
I think, so there are the greats, so I think the Gunsmoke does bring in young people. It's just so well produced, and it did have a television, so there's a connection to television if they've watched some of that. I think that genre heavy things, so one of the things that I love about old time radio is that it's so shameless about genre. It's just like, this is going to be a horror story. We're going to really just sink our teeth into it and get into it. There's no confusing it with anything else. This is a horror. There's a creaky door. There's, echoed footsteps. So I think that that's great because when young listeners come to the table, they're able to come with an understanding of genre. They kind of know what that is. They don't need to know a whole lot of backstory then. You know, if Game of Thrones, you need to know an entire world to make a sense of one episode. I don't follow the show, but I'm just saying, you know, there's these things that are hard to get into. Whereas all you need to do is be able to say, this is a mystery, and now you're going to listen to suspense, and it fits that. So they kind of bring their ideas of that. So sci-fi, that's another one. So I think sci-fi does bring in young people. Adventure brings in young people. And then heavy genres, so like your westerns, your horrors, your mysteries. Comedy is so great, but it's so hard. It's so subjective, you know. Everybody has different tastes with comedy. Every time we play a comedy, we get 3 emails the next morning that say, that was fantastic, why don't you play that more often? And then we get 3 emails that say, that was awful, I hated the comedy, it wasn't funny at all. And you know, you can't win. Some people love Gracie Allen, and some people hate her. So you can't win with comedy, but you can win. I mean, we put it on because, you know, you're going to play something that they like. But I think the genres, and so I hope to be putting more of that on too. I hope people have noticed, you know, we've put in Superman, we've been playing more sci-fi. I want to be able to play more westerns, to get back to that. I feel like Ed played more westerns, and then there was a time where the station pushed back a little bit and said, like, well, you're playing Gunsmoke, that's already a western. Gunsmoke is fantastic, but there's so much more. You know, there's so many great westerns. So I'm hoping to get some of those back on too.
Just another on the program, I'm sorry, then some other questions here, but one of the things when you took over, you moved Dragnet from its
I know.
And I'm not paying to the wall. I'm intrigued.
I know. Whew. So that was actually in a that was obviously on purpose, but we did it because we wanted to put some comedy up front in the show. We saw that some of the younger listeners are early listeners, you know. So you know, the younger listeners, as in the when I was saying, like, I'm listening with my grandparents, you know, the middle schoolers, the high schoolers, they're not listening at 9:30 and 10 o'clock. And so they're listening at 7, and they're listening from 7 till about 9, you know, when it's time for bed. Or, you know, if you can tell a high school student when it's time for bed. So we were trying to put some comedy in the first hour, and we also wanted to be able to put the kind of a classics hour. So we wanted the 8 o'clock to the 9 o'clock to be the Gunsmoke and Dragnet hour. Our hope was we were having a lot of people who didn't know the show as well tuning in about 8 o'clock. So they're kind of finishing dinner. This is my guess. You know, they're finishing dinner and then they're sitting down to listen, and they're tuning in at 8. And so we wanted to really lead with the strengths of Gunsmoke and Dragnet, and if they tune in earlier, we were trying to do things that were more kind of family friendly. So that was like the comedies were more family friendly, and then, you know, hopefully if you've hooked them with the classics hour of 8 through 9, then you're getting to put some jewels in front of them and say, okay, now that you've listened to that, here's a suspense episode, and here's this, you know. So that's kind of the plan of that, but. You know, that's one of the reasons why I started the audience forum, was because we were getting emails and phone calls both in favor of and against, and it was almost impossible for people to see what other listeners' feedback was. So people would write in and say, nobody likes this change. Everybody hates it. Why did you do this? And then I would get another email that says, this is amazing. Thank you so much. My high school student is listening with me, you know, to the show. And I say, these people need to see each other. So that's why I started the forum, so that people could have a dialogue. And, you know, quite frankly, it's, you know, we're here to serve you guys. So if everybody came back and said, please bring us back Dragnet at 7:30, I mean, of course, that's, but we've also had some good response. People saying, we love that there's an hour from 8 to 9 that we get to tune in and hear, you know, these two programs back to back. So I guess it's under construction is what I would say. It's because as we get more feedback, we want to be flexible to what people desire.
Good. You were talking about genres, and we've talked about you getting involved in obscurities, if that's the right term. Martin is a very prolific author, so is Carl, as I learned tonight. Martin is the author of many books. How many books have you authored now, Martin? Not to put you on the spot or anything here.
22.
22, my goodness. And how do they break down as opposed to, I mean, you're basically, well, tell us about, you're basically doing either characters or shows. How do they break down, and can how many have focused on, say, westerns, how many mysteries, etc.?
I think I've done just about all the genres, from comedy to literary. It's it's hard to gauge because as the years progress, my first book sold 25,000 copies. 5 years later, a book on a similar subject sold 5,000 copies. Progressively over the years, I cannot gauge whether the subject itself is selling the book because the demographic that's buying the books is diminishing. For every one that sells, I probably get at least an email from someone asking why I don't post it up on the internet for free. And my response politely to it every time is, I spent $12,000 on airfare, hotel, and food expenses, and copy fees, and clearances, because I have made friends with practically at this point anyone who licenses or owns, this still retains the copyrights and trademarks for old-time radio properties. So it's, unless they can figure a way I can get 12,000 back on the internet, I'll be more than glad to put it up for free. It's not for profit. Way back when it was nice, but at this point, no. So it's kind of hard. It's not the gauge. I've done polls. I did one about 6 months ago, just under 500 people, and all I did was ask, what's your favorite radio program or programs? I didn't ask genre, nature. I was shocked at some of the results, but when you get 499 results, and they're just naming them, I would say easily number one was Jack Benny. In fact, Jack Benny was 3 times more than number 2. But then from number 2 down to 20, it was pretty much off by 4 or 5 votes. And these are just people sending in an email saying this, and this show, or this show only, or these 7 shows. Jack Benny was that big. It was phenomenally impressive. Lux Radio Theater was on top 10, and I don't care much for Lux, and that blew me away. And then some others were surprised, and then it's kind of almost obvious which ones are the mainstream loves. So maybe the one common denominator isn't the matter that they're more mainstream, as in they have more episodes existing in recorded form than other shows. So it seems shorter run shows are less of interest, which is why when Carl does research on obscure programs that aired on some local channel in Nebraska where the farmers growing corn were lucky to turn it in on their tractor radios, I don't really, there's not a huge demand for it. If he wrote a book for it, God bless him, I'd be probably the only one buying one.
I'd buy one.
Very good. While we've got you, because I know you have a busy schedule, and we want to have you back here, but I know some people are interested in your plans for Radio Recall. Can you give us any things there?
Well, I'm not replacing Jack French. I'm merely a successor. So whatever he's done, I'm kind of carrying it over. The only difference, besides a different layout, just as using newer software, I'm using different software, as you can see the sample. And I like to get the original letterhead of the logo design that was for Radio Recall put on. That's just fill in right now. What I'd like to do is have articles of variety, but they also have a purpose. In other words, if we just recently discovered air dates for episodes we didn't have air dates for, it's been around for decades, I'd like to put that as an article of a recent discovery. It's a variety of things. So an example would be, I was telling Bert earlier, and Carl, there's a source I have for You Bet Your Life, and it literally is which contestant was the highest paid and how much, what was the secret word that was used more often than any other. It's all these details over pages that I can glean, put into a nice one-page article, and here's something of amusement. So when you get your issue by email or by mail, or snail mail they call it, you really want to flip through it before you even leave the parking lot at the post office. You want to quickly go through and read it, and there'll be some surprises and fun. So, and Carl will be one of the contributors too.
Good, good. Okay. Other questions? Yes, Sally?
No, I was going to say, do you want to
Sarah.
open it up?
Pardon?
Before, I was going to say, do you want to open it up?
No, it's great, the questions that have come in already. Do we have some others? Yeah.
Okay. Now, it may be too well entrenched, but when we're talking about encouraging younger people to join, to what extent do you think that the term old-time radio is a turnoff to younger people, as opposed to something like classic radio or some other term which I can't think of, but and just whatever your thoughts are.
That's it.
Any of you, all of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't soft pedal that. You can't put a cherry on top and whipped cream and say. Frankly, they're either going to be into it or not.
Okay.
But if 1 in 100 is, all you have to do is like what I do. I go to public school every spring for a day. I hit 3 classes that I'm always invited to, and I do a quick summary of what old time radio is. I put a motto out. But I always make sure before it's the broadcast, before the school's class is over, I give them all sample CDs, and it has sorry, wrong number. It basically is like the best of the best. And then it has a few website links and stickers on the back. So I do gauge it, and I actually get at least one person every year from each class at least. So if they do through classes, at least 3 responses. So I know probably 1 in 40 easily get hooked because they actually, I don't know how many of them go home and listen to them, but they get hooked, they want more. And I just simply mail them a stack.
The other two, and then Hank. Hank, can you hang on a second? The reaction from the other two panelists here?
I would say that vintage radio, it kind of implies a different era to I almost think of that as like pre-30s. And classic radio, I think, also is a little hard to, I don't know. I think if you said to a 20-year-old, what is classic radio, they may say, oh, I don't know, something in the 70s, the 80s, back then. Right. So I think it's hard. So I think old-time radio it does so quickly point you to exactly what it is. We talk a lot about the golden age of radio.
I was just going to bring that up, right.
I personally like that. I mean, that's about as close to putting a cherry on top as you can get. It is glamorous, the golden age of radio, golden age of film. I mean, we talk about that. We don't talk about old time film. That tells you that it's, pre-code,
Silent.
right. So I think, golden age of radio. If you were trying to make it sound a little bit more glamorous and inviting, but I do think old time radio, when you refer to it that way, puts it exactly where it is in time for them. And
It's almost that
yeah, it is, and I think that's helpful because again, if you're talking about what are young people? Well, young people are just potentially interested listeners who don't have context yet. Right, that's all they are. That's what young, in that sense, is. They don't have the experience, they don't have the context. So the old time radio is helping them. Anything that helps point them to where to go, where to find it. So.
Yeah, I really don't have anything to add. I just think that when you're talking to young people, just let them know that hey, radio is totally different today than it was, obviously back then. So.
Okay, Hank.
Yeah, one thing just occurred to me, and it kind of dovetails with the podcast discussion that we had a little bit earlier. Wouldn't it be really slick if Jill or Murray had a little column in Radio Recall where they could refer us to interesting stuff that they have found online that they may not be able to air for clearance issues or something like that, but if you give us a URL, I can sure go there.
Yeah, happy to.
She's got my email address.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Okay.
Yeah,
Fred.
absolutely.
Real quick, and you might be interested in this, Jill. Years ago, I'm also a radio dealer. I deal in shows, but back in the 70s or the 80s, I got a letter from a school teacher who sent me, he was buying radio shows, using them in his class. He was an English teacher. He found a correlation between reading and listening. And because the kids were watching so much television, they were having a hard time reading a book and understanding it. So he played radio shows. He took suspense, and he had questions, the same kind of questions that you and I would have gotten in school, having read the Iliad or something, but it was, what was the motivating factor behind this? What was the reason? And it was like 10 or 15 questions based on the suspense show. And I found it fascinating. I've got to dig that letter up because a few people have asked me about that. But at that point, I realized there's a correlation between listening to the radio and reading, because you're, in both cases, using your imagination, which, when you get into the realm of television and movies, I mean, it's all up there for you. You don't have to think as much, but but radio made you use all those senses. And reading does the same thing. You pick up a book and you imagine. But a teacher had discovered this and was using it in his classroom. So, and this was probably, what, 30 years ago, I guess. So
Kudos to that teacher.
I'd like to make
That's-
a quick thing. Fred, you mentioned listening and reading. In my research in newspapers, I've come across editorials where some prominent member of the community will say, children aren't reading anymore, they're listening to the radio. You just can't win.
Right.
Okay, one more question.
Yes, you said that you don't want to have the big broadcasts get too academic with discussions. However, would it be valuable to have interviews with surviving stars or perhaps authors? The surviving stars might also get excitement, oh, this person did this, and then authors could talk for 5 or 10 minutes about a show or a character, which might also help the audience to do it, and would be a win-win for the authors as well.
Absolutely, and I think that's, and that kind of combined with the podcast idea, that is definitely an arena we want to move into. And that is something that then, once it's completed, we can podcast that, because that's essentially its programming, right? So, where it would fit in the programming, not to I guess show my hand too much, but I would probably start by putting it later on in the broadcast, get some traction, get some people writing in and saying, loved that program that you played at 9:30 or 10 o'clock, and then be able to inch it upwards. But I think that's a great idea. And that was one of the first things I said to both these two gentlemen. I said, oh, I'm so glad to meet you. When are you going to come on the show? Because I think that's great. Absolutely.
That's great. Well, radio is governed by the clock, and so are we. We need to be out of here in a little while. So I want to thank our panelists so much for appearing tonight. It was wonderful. I'm sure they'll be up. By the way, Martin also left some, Martin, you left some handouts on, who was it? Please tell me.
Canteen Girl. She passed away a few days ago. She was a staple during World War II. She's basically the American version of Tokyo Rose. And New York Times had it on their website, so I just printed out a few copies for people who are not on the internet. You can feel free to take one or just read it. It's not very lengthy, but it has the details needed.
Good, thank you. November 11th is the November meeting. Sandra Pitts-Malone will be in charge of the program, putting on the program, and its title is... Sally.
Let's talk turkey.
Let's talk turkey, and we'll get you some information on that.
Good.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
I have contacts for practically anyone who uses trademarks.